Crucifixion. Crucifixion is one of the most infamous methods of execution, primarily associated with the Roman Empire. The victim was nailed or tied to a wooden cross and left to die from suffocation, dehydration, or exposure. This slow and agonizing death could take hours or even days. The position of the body made it difficult to breathe, forcing the victim to push up on their nailed feet to take a breath, prolonging their suffering. Crucifixion was not only a method of execution, but also a public spectacle designed to deter rebellion and instill fear. The most famous victim of crucifixion was Jesus Christ, but thousands of others, including slaves and political dissidents, met the same fate. The Romans reserved this punishment for the worst criminals and enemies of the state, making it a symbol of ultimate humiliation and pain. Impalement. Impalement was a gruesome method of execution, famously used by Vlad the Impaler, the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. The victim was forced to sit on a sharp, oiled stake, which was then raised upright. Gravity would slowly pull the body down, causing unimaginable pain as the stake pierced internal organs. Death could take hours or even days, depending on the placement of the stake. Vlad used this method extensively during his reign in Wallachia, impaling thousands of victims, including enemy soldiers, criminals, and even his own people, to instill terror and maintain control. The sight of impaled bodies left in public spaces was a psychological weapon, designed to crush the morale of enemies and deter rebellion. Impalement remains one of the most horrifying punishments in history, a testament to the depths of human cruelty. Brazen Bull. The Brazen Bull, also known as the Bronze Bull, was a diabolical invention of ancient Greece. This hollow bronze statue, shaped like a bull, was designed to roast victims alive. The condemned was locked inside the bull, and a fire was lit beneath it. As the metal heated, the victim would scream in agony, and the bull's design converted their cries into sounds resembling a bull's roar. According to legend, the creator of the Brazen Bull, Perillos, presented it to the tyrant Phalaris, who then made Perillos its first victim. The Brazen Bull was not only a tool of execution, but also a form of entertainment for rulers and their courts. The sheer horror of being slowly roasted alive, combined with the psychological torment of the bull's roaring sounds, makes this one of the most sadistic punishments ever conceived. Scaphism. Scaphism, also known as the boats, was a Persian method of execution designed to inflict prolonged and excruciating suffering. The victim was placed between two hollowed-out logs or boats with their head, hands, and feet exposed. They were force-fed milk and honey to induce severe diarrhea, and more honey was smeared on their body to attract insects. The boats were then left to float in a stagnant pond, exposing the victim to the elements and swarms of insects. Over days, the victim would endure dehydration, starvation, and the torment of insects eating their flesh. Death came slowly, often from a combination of infection, septic shock, and organ failure. Scaphism was reserved for the worst criminals and enemies of the state, and its cruelty was meant to serve as a stark warning to others. Breaking wheel. The breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel, was a brutal execution device used in medieval Europe. The victim's limbs were tied to the spokes of a large wooden wheel, and an executioner would use an iron bar to shatter their bones. The process was excruciating, and the victim was often left on the wheel to die slowly from their injuries. In some cases, the broken body was woven through the spokes of the wheel and displayed publicly as a warning. The breaking wheel was primarily used for heinous crimes, such as murder, treason, and witchcraft. Its combination of physical agony and public humiliation made it one of the most feared punishments of its time. Flaying. Flaying, the act of skinning a person alive, was a punishment used in various cultures, including by the Aztecs, Assyrians, and medieval Europeans. The process involved removing the victim's skin, often starting with the limbs or face, causing excruciating pain and severe blood loss. In some cases, the skin was displayed as a trophy or used to create gruesome artifacts. The Aztecs practiced flaying as part of religious rituals, believing it honored their gods. In medieval Europe, it was used as a punishment for treason and other serious crimes. The physical and psychological torment of flaying made it one of the most horrifying methods of execution in history. Sawing. Through the middle. Sawing was a gruesome execution method where the victim was hung upside down and sawed in half vertically, starting from the groin. This position ensured that the victim remained conscious for as long as possible, as blood flow to the brain was maintained. The process was slow and agonizing, often taking hours to complete. Sawing was used in ancient Rome, the Middle East, and during the Spanish Inquisition. It was reserved for the worst criminals, including traitors and heretics. The combination of physical pain and psychological terror made sawing one of the most brutal punishments ever devised. Burning at the stake. Burning at the stake was a common punishment for heresy, witchcraft, and treason in medieval and early modern Europe. The victim was tied to a stake and surrounded by wood, which was then set ablaze. Death came from smoke inhalation or burns, but not before immense suffering. Joan of Arc, the French heroine, is one of the most famous victims of this method. Burning at the stake was not only a form of execution, but also a public spectacle designed to deter others from committing similar crimes. The combination of physical agony and public humiliation made it one of the most feared punishments of its time. The Blood Eagle. The Blood Eagle is a legendary Norse method of execution, described in sagas as a ritualistic and highly symbolic punishment. The victim's back was cut open, their ribs broken, and their lungs pulled out to resemble wings. While some historians debate its historical accuracy, the sheer brutality of this method has cemented its place in infamy. The Blood Eagle was said to be reserved for the worst enemies, often as an offering to the gods. The combination of physical torture and symbolic significance makes it one of the most horrifying punishments in history. The Judas Cradle. The Judas Cradle was a torture device used during the Spanish Inquisition. The victim was suspended above a pyramid-shaped seat and slowly lowered onto it, allowing the point to penetrate their anus or vagina. Weights were often added to increase the pain, and the victim could be left in this position for hours or days. The Judas Cradle caused severe internal injuries and often led to death from infection or shock. Its use was intended to extract confessions or punish heretics, making it one of the most sadistic tools of the Inquisition. Rat torture. Rat torture was a horrific method of execution, used in medieval Europe and during the 20th century by authoritarian regimes. A cage containing rats was placed on the victim's stomach, and the cage was heated. The rats, desperate to escape, would burrow into the victim's body, causing excruciating pain and severe internal injuries. This method was often used to extract confessions or punish enemies of the state. The psychological terror of being eaten alive by rats, combined with the physical agony, makes rat torture one of the most horrifying punishments in history. Keelhauling. Keelhauling was a naval punishment used to maintain discipline on ships. The victim was tied to a rope and dragged under the ship's keel. The rough hull would tear their skin, and they often drowned or died from their injuries. Keelhauling was a brutal and public form of punishment, designed to deter mutiny and disobedience. The combination of physical pain and the risk of drowning made it one of the most feared punishments in maritime history. Lingchi, death by 1,000 cuts. Lingchi, also known as death by 1,000 cuts, was a Chinese method of execution where the victim was slowly cut into pieces over time. Small cuts were made to prolong the agony, and death came from blood loss or shock. Lingchi was used as a punishment for the most serious crimes, such as treason or patricide. The process was not only physically torturous, but also deeply humiliating, as it was often carried out in public. Lingchi was officially abolished in China in 1905, but its legacy as one of the most brutal punishments in history remains. Iron Maiden. The Iron Maiden is one of the most iconic torture devices in history, often associated with medieval Europe. This coffin-like structure was lined with sharp spikes, and the victim was forced inside. When the door was closed, the spikes would pierce the victim's body, causing severe pain and injury. While some historians debate the historical accuracy of the Iron Maiden, its image has become synonymous with torture and cruelty. The combination of physical agony and psychological terror makes it one of the most feared punishments in history. Drawn and quartered. Drawn and quartered was a brutal method of execution used in medieval England for treason. The victim was dragged to the execution site, hanged until nearly dead, and then disemboweled and beheaded. Their body was cut into 4 parts, which were often displayed in public as a warning. This punishment was reserved for the most serious crimes, such as high treason, and its combination of physical pain and public humiliation made it one of the most feared punishments in history. Conclusion. These punishments remind us of humanity's capacity for cruelty, but they also highlight how far we've come in terms of justice and human rights. While these methods are now relics of the past, they serve as a stark reminder of the importance of compassion and fairness in our modern world. Thank you for joining me on this journey through history's darkest moments. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most fascinating and chilling stories.